Hey guys, this is another Beatles fan, and this is a McCartney 3 review. McCartney 3 3 years later. That's how I'm gonna call it. And, you know, gonna tell you guys a bit about the story of this record. And TLDR, if you want to know, I think it's one of Paul's best albums in maybe 20 years. I really like it, and I feel like it's always gonna be underrated, really. And I'll make my point throughout the video, but that's the main gist here. I think it's an underrated album, although it sold pretty well for McCartney standards in 2020. This is a 2020 album. And it did well with the critics, but at the same time, I do think it should um, it should go down in history as a great work by Poe, and I don't know if it will. Anyway, so let's start talking about the album. And the first thing I want to tell you is the context. So it was the COVID-19 pandemic, right? Unfortunately, I think we all remember that. We went through some pretty rough times. I believe everybody did. And so Paul was working. He was, of course, isolated in his house in Hog Hill Mill Studios. His house is called Hog Hill Mill in England, but his studio is only called Hog Hill, I believe. And he started working on a song called Longtail Winterbird, which is a song that appears on the album. It's the first one. I'm gonna talk about all of the songs in order. I'm gonna comment a bit about them. But anyway, he was working on it, and then he started working on some songs he hadn't finished of the past years, and it's something that he does a lot. He sometimes keeps songs he doesn't know exactly what to do, and he'll come back to it later. He does that pretty often. And anyway, when this is what his version of the story, right? So he started recording overdubs, playing everything by himself, and when he realized he had a full album, so and then he thought, oh my God, this is exactly like McCartney 1 and 2. So it's a pretty great time to talk about why this is McCartney 3, because in 1970 Paul released McCartney 1, and I've already talked about this album on the channel. Incredible album. Look at this artwork, a work of art, really. Um, this picture here is a classic, right? Right after the Beatles breakup. So this is McCartney, in released in 1970, and this is McCartney 2, released in 1980. It's one of my favorite Paul McCartney albums. I also think this one's underrated. I'm sorry. And this cover art is so cool too. So by his accounts, he started thinking about the album, and he realized, I have a McCartney situation here, a McCartney, and I'm gonna mention McCartney a lot. And when I mention Paul, I'm gonna call him Paul, and McCartney. I mean the series of albums, McCartney 1, 2, and 3, right? And then he decided, okay, let's release McCartney 3. And that's the story of it. I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with it. Um, Anyway, let's talk about the cover before we start talking about the songs in themselves by themselves. I don't like this cover too much. I think it's the weakest of the trilogy, um, and that's a bit unfair because I feel like McCartney 1 and 2 have such amazing covers. This one is okay. I like the font they used. But anyway, it's an okay cover. I wouldn't say it's one of the best, but I wouldn't say it's one of the worst either. This back picture here is cool, but there is a CD version. They released a ton of versions of this die here. Actually, it's die, right? It's singular. But they released a ton of version of this die, um, of different colors. And there's a variant in which there's a picture of Paul here, and he looks um, way better than on this picture, I think. Anyway, let's take a look here at the the label. I like to show it to you guys. So I'm gonna show you guys the vinyl version. So we have a sheet, a lyric sheet here, and the album comes in here. I don't like that Paul's albums come in paper sleeves. I understand why, but I mean Jimi Hendrix's ones, they come in that fancy plastic thing. I don't know the name. Anyway, this is McCartney 3. This is the label. It's a pretty standard label, pretty minimalist, I'd say. And it looks cool, looks good. Um, and there's also some messages here about who plays what, and it says that this album is dedicated in the memory of our friend Eddie Klein, who was born in 1943 and who passed away in 2020. Eddie Klein was a friend of Paul's, and he actually built the studio, Hog Hill. So he passed away in 2020, and Paul's this is Paul's tribute to him, which is lovely, right? Forgot to mention, this is also really important. You guys know that exactly, um, I don't do necessarily um, scripts for the videos, but it's also important to mention that on all of the McCartney albums, Paul plays every single instrument. I forgot to mention that, and that's so important. But to us, Beatles fans, I don't know if you guys know about that, but to us, it's a given, right? The synonym for McCartney albums are, um, knowing that Paul plays everything on them, which is super cool, right? It's a boss move. Anyway, so there, it's a gatefold, and I just want to show you guys the gatefold real quick. This video is gonna be super long, but whatever. It's a huge gatefold. You know what? I'm gonna show you guys the CD one, but I think it's you guys could see some things, maybe some pictures. I forgot the CD had a gatefold too. The CD is super similar to the album, except for this little booklet here, made in Rockdown. Right? It's of course a wordplay with lockdown and rock. And there are several pictures of Paul here, and they look great. Paul riding his horse, the same one as the back cover. Paul on his drums, and this looks incredible, right? I believe it's Mary McCartney. She's also a photographer, like her mom, Linda. Um, and the pictures look real great. This is Paul with Bill Black's bass. I was gonna say bass cover. I don't know why I was gonna say that. Bill Black is Elvis bassist, and he does play this bass on Women and Wives, and I'm gonna mention that when I go to the track listing. Anyway, this is the gatefold. Is the same one as the vinyl, and I like how the CD kind of matches and mimics the vinyl. I think it's a cool experience, especially if you don't have the vinyl. I like this picture here of Paul, Nancy, his wife, and his dog. I don't know the dog's name. I'm sorry, Paul. I failed this time. Anyway, okay, this is McCartney 3. So let's go through the track listing here real quick. I'm gonna give you guys my opinions on it. Before that, though, let's drink some water. It's too hot in here. I live in Brazil, it's too hot. Anyway, we start with Long-Tailed Winterbird. It's the song that kind of kicked off Paul's project, and it's a cool intro song. It's an intro to the album, as I said. It's the only instrumental track, and that is something of importance because McCartney albums always have instrumentals. McCartney 3 only has one, but McCartney 1 and 2 are filled with them. Maybe two, maybe three or four in each, and I like it. I think it's vibey. And what Paul does here is the McCartney albums are very experimental, and what he does here, I feel, in the in most of the McCartney 3 tracks, he starts piling up these songs, and he creates the soundscape um, that feels kind of ethereal, feels maybe even a bit nostalgic. That's what I feel about this album. He creates these soundscapes, which is something that he doesn't do on the other two McCartney ones. McCartney 2 has an electronic side to it, and McCartney 1 has a demo, homey feel, a way more of a straight rock feel to them. And this one, I don't know if you guys understand what I mean, because it's kind of hard to explain. But the album is atmospheric, right? That's what I mean by that. It's Paul's most atmospheric album in that sense. Um, then we track two is Find My Way. Find My Way was chosen as a single, and it's understandable because it's a catchy pop rock song. It's got a cool chorus, and it sounds good. I like it. Pretty Boys. So we have here the third track, and it's one of my favorites. The context is Paul mentioned that he thought about being taken pictures and kind of the sexualization that comes with it. It's pretty sexual, pretty intense, as he mentioned sometimes, and some male models do feel like they're sexualized a lot. That's kind of the vibe Paul's coming through here, talking a bit about that. And it's a weird subject, to be honest. Maybe one of the weirdest subjects Paul's talked about. And again, it's got that soundscape, that atmosphere that involves the whole song, especially on the solo part where he whistles. I love that part. And then we have Women and Wives, another one of my favorites. It's Paul's favorite. At least he mentioned that on his interview with Jimmy Kimmel, if I'm not mistaken. He did this interview on the same day the album came out, and it's the only song Paul's performed live, and by that I mean he's performed it on the sound check. He didn't perform it in any of his gigs, and I was fortunate enough to have seen it on the sound check. If you guys don't know, I met Paul um, in December actually last month, and there's a story about it in my previous video. I told you guys all about it. Um, anyway, he said that this song, Women and Wives, was inspired by Leadbelly. He was reading a book about him. If you guys don't know, Leadbelly is a huge blues guy, and he plays the Bill Black's bass in this song, so it's got this bluesy tone to it. And there's an outtake released on Japanese CDs. I'm gonna talk about 4 outtakes here, and these outtakes came out on Japanese editions of the CD. So that's how I heard it. I don't have the CD. There's uploads on it on YouTube. The middle part is completely different. It's totally different, actually, and it caught me by surprise the first time I heard it. I've heard it a couple of times. I quite enjoy the final track more. I think it packs more of a punch. It sounds better. So Paul did a good choice, in my opinion, changing that middle section. But what also feels different is that it's only Paul and the piano, and the recording is superb. So we can hear everything. We can hear every single detail in Paul's voice and in the piano, and it's so intimate. It's so cool. So I would recommend you to check it out. Check the outtake out. It's on Spotify. It's the only outtake that is also on Spotify. I think it's worth checking it out, especially if you like Women and Wives. Next one, and it's the last one of the side A of the LP. So this is important, right? I'm talking about the track listing here on the album, on the LP, which is different from streaming and the CD. And I didn't know that. I hadn't realized that up until now. when I did some research for the video. So I'm gonna mention the LP um, side, uh, the LP side A and side B, um, because I feel like it's the best option here. And by that I mean that Sliding comes before Deep Deep Feeling. The next song, so we have Women and Wives, Sliding, and Deep Deep Feeling on the LP, with Sliding closing side A. And on the CD, it switched. It's Deep Deep Feeling and then Sliding. Sliding is uh, a song that is super special to the McCartney trilogy because it's the only song in which somebody else other than Paul plays um, uh, an instrument, right? And excluding Linda and her backing vocals on McCartney 1, but Abe Laboriel Jr. plays the drums and Rusty Anderson plays the guitar on it. So it's the first time this happened on a McCartney 3. So McCartney albums are just Paul playing by himself, except for this single track here. And I just realized I skipped a whole song. Can you believe it? I'm gonna come back to it. Anyway, Sliding is a harmless, rocking fun. It's got a cool riff, and it came out. It came to be on a jam that Paul does every soundcheck. He did a jam on my soundcheck too, and this one was on Dusseldorf, Germany, where the riff kind of came alive, right? And on the Japanese CD, we can see this jam, and it feels so different. It's slower, it's bluesier, and it sounds so good. I think I like it better than the final version, to be honest. I think it sounds more different. Sliding sounds kind of generic, in my opinion. It's just generic rock, right? Kind of dad rock. And don't get me wrong, that's not bad necessarily, but I like the bluesier feel of the Dusseldorf jam. And but I understand why he didn't put it on the album. I think the bluesier feel is too similar to the vibe we get on Women and Wives, and later on forgot the song name, on Deep Down. I feel like, sorry, I feel like it's too similar, so I understand why he went with a more rocking sound. And I forgot to mention, before Sliding, we have Lavatory Lil. I totally forgot that one. And it's not the greatest song in the album, in my opinion. And we know it's a song about Heather Mills. Some point that out, and Paul's mentioned that Lavatory Lil, in the lyrics, she's a person who is kind of evil, and she hits you in the back, and like the lyrics say. And I don't know where I've seen this, but it's almost confirmed it's about Heather Mills, although Paul didn't mention her name specifically. It's got cool guitars. Paul uses his Telecaster, this one here. I love the Tele. I think it's such a beautiful guitar, and it sounds good. Sounds great. Um, it's got a country twang to it because of the guitar. The tone of the guitar um, does that to the song, right? Brings a country um, western feel to it. And there's, of course, the name Lavatory Lil is kind of a play on Polythene Pam, I think, right? It's too similar not to be a play on Polythene Pam, in my opinion. And we also have an outtake of that one on the Japanese CD too. And it's a demo. Paul plays it on acoustic guitar. It sounds exactly like the final version, of course, except for the drumming, the overdubs, the bass, but it's the same arrangement. That's what I mean. Anyway, we talked about side A. I really like sound A. I think it kind of has this hill shape to it in quality. The two middle songs, Pretty Boys and Women in Whites, are my favorites. And now we have side B, and side B gets experimental. Side B gets crazy, starting with Deep Deep Feeling, and I truly believe Deep Deep Feeling will go down on history as one of those super underrated Paul McCartney jams that all the fans know and love, right? It should go down on history because it's a huge experimental track. Again, it's got that sense of atmosphere I mentioned. It's the peak of atmosphere and vibe and of the painting of soundscapes that Paul likes to do a lot. And I feel like this album does that so well because maybe it has less overdubs, and that's a good thing. Every single instrument and every single synth and piano, they have so much room to breathe in. And kudos for Paul on the production side on this one. I feel like it's an incredible production, and the whole song just breathes in a beautiful way. And the lyrics talk about the deep feeling we have for someone, and that maybe this huge feeling of love kind of backfires and ends up hurting us. And it's not a super deep lyric. It's pun not intended, but it, it it fits the whole aesthetic of the track, and it's one of my favorites, if not my favorite. Um, if you guys don't like it that much, I'd recommend you give it another shot. But remember, it's experimental, it's different, right? And then we have the Kiss of Venus. The Kiss of Venus is classic Paul on acoustic guitar, Blackbird, or Here Today, or Mother Nature's Son, or Yesterday. We can talk about Paul on acoustic guitar, the whole video here for hours and hours because he's such a master at it. And again, I do feel like this is another underrated track. This should be up there with his great acoustic guitar numbers, but it's not. And I thought in a minute that people would appreciate it more. I think it. I don't know why, because this album was talked about so much. I felt like at the time of release, I felt like maybe the Kiss of Venus will be caught in the public eye. But it wasn't, and I feel it will go down on history like Calico Skies. Um, a great Paul acoustic guitar numbers that fans know and love. But unfortunately, most of us who know and love are super fans, right? And we have the final of the extra CD tracks, Japanese tracks here. It's a phone demo, and it's cool to hear it because we can see that the arrangement isn't fully done yet, the way we heard on the record, but it's there. The arrangement is there, and it's cool to see that Paul records songs on his phone and ideas because it's something as a musician I do, and it's fun seeing that. So that was a cool addition, I think. I wouldn't imagine Paul would have put a phone demo as an extra song on his album, so it's cool. Okay, last three songs we have Seize the Day. I think John, if he was still with us, he would have called it a granny song. It's a harmless, fun track. Such a happy one. It's so McCartney like to have a happy go lucky song like that. And it sounds good. It sounds maybe a bit tone deaf. I don't know. But it's just Paul being positive Paul among during the pandemic. So that's cool. That's fine. I like the instrumentation. I love Paul's happy songs. Don't get me wrong. I love it. And that's another one of them. So that's cool. It sounds a bit like the Beatles. I think somebody who isn't a huge Paul or Beatles fan, looking at it um, from outside of the Beatles bubble, I think they would recognize it as Beatley, right? Um, and then we have Deep Down. It's uh, a track that I feel like, again, atmospheric. It's got that vibe to it. And Paul does some falsettos. And the very beginning of the song starts with Paul's falsetto only, and then the drums and the bass and the synths kick in. And the first time I heard it, I thought it was like a flute synthesizer or whatever because Paul was so on tune and his voice was so good. He still can pull falsettos off, and that impressed me. That was super nice. And I saw somebody mention that a radio edit of sorts. I think it was on Reddit. Somebody mentioned that a radio edit of sorts would be maybe turn it into a hit or something like that. I think it could be played on radios. It sounds modern. That's maybe the biggest compliment I can give to the song. Although I do feel like it runs um, a bit too long. I think it should have been cut a little earlier. So because the whole vibe kind of feels boring after some time, right? And Paul himself mentioned in an interview that he didn't know where the song was going, and he kind of made everything up on the spot. And so I feel like he could have cut some of that down. Last but not least, this video is fucking huge. Apologize. We have not deep feeling, man. Winterbird slash When Winter Comes, and this is kind of a reprise of the first song, Longtail Winterbird, but it has When Winter Comes. It's a song that Paul recorded during his Flaming Pie era on guitar, and George Martin produced it. I believe he wrote that song for an animated video of sorts, and it even came out after McCartney III, so you can check it out on YouTube. And it sounds so good. It's Paul singing about the country and fixing the fence and taking care of the sheep, right? Kind of like Heart of the Country style, so it has that Heart of the Country vibe that is prevalent on McCartney 1 and Ram, especially Ram, I feel like. And it's a good closer. Paul's voice here is better than ever because it's 90s Paul, it's not 2020s Paul. And I think it's a cool closer. It's a sweet, sweet song. It reminds me of a game called Stardew Valley. I played it a lot, a farming game, and I enjoy it. Um, okay, that was a huge video, guys. I hope you guys liked it. Kind of went and deep dive into the songs here. Let's just close this review with my general impressions, right? So when I look this way, it's because I'm looking at the notes I've taken to make this video. So I think Paul's Old Man voice is here to stay, right? There's no way around it. And this album was released on 2020, in 2020, right? And we're in 2024. So if Paul comes up with a new album, which is overdue by now, Paul, come on, release a new record for God's sake. Um, I think his voice will continue to be like that. I'm sure of that. But it sounds good. I think he's able to make his voice sound super natural still. And all the songs reflect that pretty well. So that's not a problem. That's even To me, at least, that's a bonus point here. And lots of experimentation, as I said. I love the McCartney albums, the three of them, and this one fits so well. Feels like a McCartney album. And that's not too hard, because the McCartney albums are so varied, but it does have that feeling of homemade experimentation, as I mentioned before, and I love when there's some dialogue between Paul albums, being on the title or on the idea that Paul plays everything, being on two albums kind of coming off of the same batch of songs like Tug of War and Pipes of Peace, and the songs kind of play along and the titles. Um, I always love that. So that's great. And I think this album, not every song's a 10 out of 10, but the whole package is incredible, and we should be thankful that Macca is still at this level, really. It's underrated because Paul is not an underrated musician, of course. Paul is um, one of the greatest songwriters ever, in my opinion, and people know that, right? He is regarded as one of the greatest songwriters ever. So Paul is not underrated, but I feel like some of his solo work is, and this one especially. If this was released um, in the 70s or whatever, I feel like it could have made a bigger impact. And I do want to grow old and see how this album um, how the discourse on this album will evolve, right? Let's see how it goes, right? But I'm pretty sure people will still like it. I wouldn't be surprised if it turned into a cult classic like Ram did, and I'm pretty sure McCartney 2 will become a cult classic too because it's got everything for it. I'm cheering for it, and I'm also hoping that McCartney 3 becomes this cult classic because it deserves it, right? Anyway, what do you guys think about McCartney 3? Do you guys like it? Please let me know in the comments. This video is too long, but I hope at least some of you stayed here with me during this crazy ride, right? Anyway, see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much. Have a great one, guys.